70,000 men, 54 elephants, scythed chariots with blades spinning from the wheels. The largest army the Seleucid Empire could gather, stretched across a plain between two rivers near Magnesia at Sipylum in December 190 BCE. Facing them, 30,000 Romans and their Greek allies. You look at those numbers and think the Seleucids win. They should win. But in a single afternoon, Rome destroyed 2/3 of that massive force and broke the last great empire of Alexander's successors. How does that happen? How do elephants, living tanks of the ancient world, turn on their own army? How do scythed chariots designed to shred infantry flee in panic before they touch the enemy? And how do 300 Roman dead stack against 50,000 Seleucid corpses? 22 of them, standing between the pike blocks of the Seleucid phalanx. When projectiles rained down and panic set in, those elephants stampeded through their own lines. The formation broke. The slaughter began. But we're getting ahead. Let's rewind to how Rome and the Seleucid Empire ended up here, 4 kilometers from each other's camps, both armies convinced they'd win. Antiochus III earned his title the Great by rebuilding everything his ancestors lost. From 223 BCE, when he took the throne at 18, he marched. He crushed rebellions in Media. He pushed into Parthia and Bactria, securing treaties. He crossed into India, meeting King Sophicacenus, returning with 150 elephants. By 201 BCE, he'd restored Seleucid dominance from the Mediterranean to the borders of India. The man had momentum. Then he looked west. The Aetolian League, Greeks who felt cheated by Rome's settlement, sent envoys to Antiochus. They promised support. They said Greeks would rally to him. In September 192 BCE, Antiochus landed at Demetrius with 10,000 infantry, 500 cavalry, 6 elephants, and 300 ships. Small force. Big mistake. Roman consul Manius Achilleus Glabrio brought 40,000 men. Antiochus had his 10,000, plus Aetolian allies. The Romans found the mountain path, same one the Persians used centuries earlier, flanked Antiochus and crushed him. The Seleucid king fled to Ephesus. His European adventure was over in 8 months. September 191 BCE, Battle of Corcus. Roman fleet defeats the Seleucids. August 190 BCE, Battle of the Eurymedon. Hannibal, yes, that Hannibal, now serving Antiochus as a naval commander, loses to the Rhodians. September 190 BCE, Battle of Myonnesus. Combined Roman-Rhodian fleet smashes the Seleucid navy. Antiochus lost control of the Aegean. That meant Roman legions could cross to Asia Minor. That meant war was coming to his doorstep. Appian's Syrian Wars from the 2nd century CE, which preserves detailed troop dispositions and casualty figures cross-referenced with archaeological evidence from the battlefield site near modern Manisa, Turkey. Now back to the information. Everyone knew who really commanded. The Senate gave Lucius the official title. Scipio Africanus held the army's loyalty. They crossed the Hellespont with 30,000 men, 4 legions, each legion 5,400 men. Latin allies matching that number. King Eumenes II of Pergamon brought 800 cavalry and 3,000 infantry. Achaean peltasts, 3,000. Cretan and Illyrian archers, 800. Thracian and Macedonian volunteers, 2,000. And 16 African elephants. Smaller than the Asian breed, everyone knew it, but they had to answer Antiochus's 54. He had 54 Indian elephants, the best in the world. He had cataphracts, heavy cavalry and mail armor. He had the phalanx, 16,000 pikemen armed Macedonian style. He had scythed chariots, something Romans had never faced, and he had chosen his ground. Antiochus positioned his camp on Mount Sipylos, fortified, waiting. The Romans advanced from Pergamon toward Thyatira, expecting to find him. He wasn't there. He'd moved 15 kilometers northeast of Magnesia, camping between the Phrygios and Hermos rivers, 3 sides protected by water, 1 open approach. Let the Romans come to him. The Romans reached the river Phrygios, made camp 6.5 kilometers from Antiochus. The Seleucid king sent 1,000 Galatian and Dahai cavalry to probe, trying to lure the Romans into exposed ground. The Romans didn't bite. 3 days later, they moved again, closer, 4 kilometers from the Seleucid camp. They positioned themselves in a horseshoe plain, rivers on 3 sides. Smart. Limited the effectiveness of Antiochus's massive cavalry advantage. He had 12,000 horsemen to Rome's 3,000, but cramped terrain neutralizes numbers. But he also knew his numbers, 70,000 to 30,000, more than 2 to 1. His elephants outnumbered theirs 54 to 16. His cavalry quadrupled theirs. On paper, this was his fight. On the dawn of the 6th day, some say it was the 3rd day after the Romans' final repositioning, Antiochus decided. He couldn't wait forever. His men were getting demoralized, watching a smaller force refuse to back down. He marched out. Antiochus deployed his center around the phalanx, 16,000 men, 10 tack size, each 1,600 strong, 50 men wide, 32 deep. Sarissas, Macedonian pikes 18 feet long, extending forward in a forest of steel. Between each tack-sized, he placed 2 elephants, 20 elephants total in the phalanx intervals, 2 more groups of 16 elephants flanking the main formation, 54 total. The phalanx looked like a wall with towers. That's what Appian said, a wall studded with living siege engines. 1,200 Dahai horse archers, famous for firing backwards while retreating. 3,000 Cretan and Trallian light infantry. 2,500 Mysian archers, Sirtian slingers, Elamaean archers. Antiochus commanded this wing personally. 1,000 heavy cavalry, the companions. 3,000 more cataphracts, and in front of them, the secret weapon, scythed chariots, blades extending from the wheels, designed to mow down anything in their path. Antiochus had seen them work before, and dromedary-mounted Arab archers for good measure. Philippos, master of elephants, commanded the center phalanx. 72,000 soldiers. Some modern historians say it was closer to 50,000, that ancient sources inflated numbers. But even at 50,000, Antiochus had the Romans outnumbered. Princeps behind them, more experienced, heavier equipment. Triarii in the rear, veterans with long spears, the last line of defense. 2 legions in the center, 5,400 men each. Latin allies on their flanks, matching numbers. 20,000 heavy infantry total in the center. Behind them, those 16 African elephants in reserve. Scipio knew they couldn't match Antiochus's elephants in size or number. They were there to prevent a complete elephant rout, nothing more. 3,000 cavalry, 800 Pergamene, the rest Roman and Italian. 3,000 Achaean and Pergamene light infantry, 800 Cretan and Illyrian archers, 2,000 Thracian and Macedonian volunteers behind as camp guards. This is where the Romans concentrated their mobile force. This is where they tried to break Antiochus's line. Scipio Africanus was there, but sources disagree. Some say he fell ill before the battle, command passing to his adjutant Gnaeus Domitius. Others say he was present, but in an advisory role. Either way, Domitius executed the plan. His plan: smash the Roman left with superior cavalry, then wheel around and crush the legions from behind. Classic hammer and anvil. The phalanx would hold the center, the cavalry would destroy the flanks. He led the charge personally, cataphracts and Aguma cavalry thundering forward. The Latin infantry on the Roman left couldn't hold. They broke, fled back to the camp. Antiochus pursued, pushing a kilometer to the Roman fortifications. At the camp, Tribune Marcus Aemilius Lepidus commanded 200 cavalry and camp guards. He saw the fleeing legionaries. He could have let them through, fortified the camp, hoped to hold. Instead, he stopped them. Livy says Lepidus threatened to kill any man who continued fleeing. The shame worked. The legionaries reformed. They held a line at the camp entrance. 200 cavalry plus rallied infantry versus Antiochus's heavy cavalry. And they held. The Seleucid cavalry couldn't take a fortified position, couldn't dismount and storm it effectively. Antiochus got bogged down. He'd won his wing, but he was stuck, separated from the main battle by a kilometer of ground. His army needed him. He wasn't there. 40 chariots, 4 horses each, blades extending from the wheels and axles, designed to plunge into infantry formations and create chaos. Eumenes acted fast. He sent his light troops forward. Cretan archers, Achaean slingers, javelin throwers. Loose formation. Orders. Aim for the horses, not the crews. They bolted back into their own lines. The chariots plowed through the Galatian cavalry, and the camel-mounted Arab archers behind them. Chaos. The entire Seleucid left wing fell into disorder before making contact with the Romans. The Arabs broke completely, fled the field. 3,000 cataphracts, heavy armored cavalry that should have been unstoppable, went down. Livy says the cataphracts were killed to the last man. That's probably exaggeration, but it shows the scale of the rout. The Galatians, the Cappadocians, the mixed mercenary troops, all broke. Eumenes shattered the Seleucid left wing in one decisive charge. Then he turned his cavalry toward the center. No flank protection. The Roman center, Domitius's legions, advanced from the front. 3,000 Achaean and Pergamene light infantry moved ahead, plus 800 archers. They didn't engage the phalanx directly. They didn't have to. They targeted the elephants. The elephants were armored. Livy describes head armor, crests, towers on their backs with 4 soldiers per tower plus the driver. But armor doesn't cover everything. And elephants, for all their size, panic easily. The wounds piled up. The noise, war cries, clashing metal, the thud of missiles surrounded them. They broke. They were locked in formation, shoulder to shoulder, sarissas extending forward. When the elephants came through, men were trampled. The formation broke. 16,000 pikemen lost cohesion. Once a phalanx breaks, it's not a fighting unit anymore. It's 16,000 individuals trying not to die. They got inside the phalanx's pike range. Once you're past the sarissa points, a pikeman is defenseless. The swords went to work. The phalangites started dropping their weapons, running. Some formed squares, trying to march off the battlefield in formation. Didn't work. Eumenes' cavalry hit them from the sides and rear. The Roman legions pressed from the front. Livy describes the scene. Men falling over each other, trampled by their own elephants, cut down by cavalry, stabbed by legionaries. The formations dissolved. Others say he saw it was over and retreated immediately with his surviving cavalry to Sardis. Either way, his army was gone, against 53,000 Seleucid dead. Even if we cut those numbers in half for exaggeration, it's still a massacre. Modern estimates say 10,000 Seleucid dead, 5,000 Roman. That's more conservative. Either way, Antiochus lost his army. The Romans took it by late afternoon. By nightfall, the Battle of Magnesia was over. The Seleucid Empire's western army was destroyed. One volley of missiles, and they're useless. He positioned his elephants between his phalanx units instead of on the flanks or in reserve. When they panicked, they destroyed his own formation instead of the enemy's. He personally led the cavalry charge on the right wing, won that sector, then got stuck at the Roman camp. The army needed its commander. He wasn't there when the center collapsed. Eumenes recognized the chariot threat immediately and countered it perfectly. Domitius kept the legions disciplined, advancing when the phalanx broke instead of charging prematurely. They used their light troops, archers, slingers, to panic the elephants, the exact tactic that works. And they fought in their flexible manipular formation. When part of the line engaged, other parts could maneuver. The phalanx couldn't do that. Once committed, it's locked in. They were fighting in enemy territory, far from reinforcements. One mistake, and they'd be destroyed. They didn't make mistakes. Final treaty signed at Apamea in Phrygia in 188 BCE. Roman power expanded without Rome taking direct control. Client kingdoms did the work. 990,000 pounds. The weight of the Seleucid economy. Antiochus couldn't afford another war. His successors would spend decades paying this debt. Hand over 20 hostages to Rome. Changed every 3 years, except Antiochus' own son. Give up Hannibal. The Carthaginian general fled to Crete before they could seize him, later to Bithynia. He'd never returned to the Mediterranean mainstream. When Antiochus III died in 187 BCE, killed during a temple robbery in Elam while trying to fund his indemnity payments, his son Seleucus IV took over. Seleucus largely ignored the military clauses, built ships, fielded armies. But he never challenged Rome directly. The memory of Magnesia was too fresh. They invoked the Treaty of Apamea, inspected Seleucid forces, found elephants, found ships beyond the limit. They hamstrung the elephants on the spot, burned the ships. Seleucid citizens watched their military strength destroyed by foreign envoys. A man named Leptines of Laodicea assassinated Octavius in revenge. Another named Isocrates suggested killing the entire delegation. Rome didn't invade, didn't need to. The point was made. The Seleucids would stay weak. Mobility. The phalanx couldn't maneuver in broken terrain, couldn't adjust when flanked. Once the formation broke, it was slaughter. Terrain varies. Flanks collapse. Elephants panic. The legion adapted. The phalanx didn't. After Magnesia, every major power shifted toward Roman-style infantry or hybridized their phalanx with more mobile units. Pergamon controlled western Anatolia. Rhodes controlled the coast. Both were clients of Rome. Both would call on Rome if threatened. That meant Roman influence stretched from Italy to the Taurus Mountains without Roman governors, without Roman garrisons. When a threat emerged, like Perseus of Macedon in the Third Macedonian War in 168 BCE, Rome responded with overwhelming force, crushed it, then went home. The Seleucid Empire survived. Antiochus III died a year after Magnesia, but his dynasty continued for another century and a half. They ruled Syria, Mesopotamia, parts of Iran, but they never reclaimed the West. Armenia and Sophene declared independence after Apamea. Cappadocia aligned with Rome. Parthia, always semi-independent, grew bolder. The Seleucids fought civil wars, faced rebellions, slowly fragmented. By 63 BCE, when Pompey the Great annexed Syria as a Roman province, the empire that once stretched from the Aegean to India was a rump state around Damascus. A few claim he advised Antiochus on tactics, but there's no solid evidence. What's certain, after Magnesia, he fled again. Crete, then Bithynia. 183 BCE, Roman envoys cornered him. He took poison rather than surrender. The man who humiliated Rome at Cannae, who marched elephants over the Alps, who threatened Rome itself, died in exile because of a battle he may not have attended. After Magnesia, his brother Lucius was accused of embezzling Seleucid money. The trial of the Scipios in 187 BCE attacked both brothers. Accusations: Lucius couldn't account for 500 talents from Antiochus, war indemnity or personal bribe. Publius Africanus was implicated. Some sources say he was acquitted, others say he wasn't formally tried, but his influence collapsed. He withdrew from Rome to his villa at Laternum in Campania, bitter, ill. He died in 184 or 183 BCE. The hero of Zama and Magnesia, the man who defeated Hannibal and broke the Seleucid Empire, died essentially exiled from the city he saved. He allegedly ordered burial at Laternum instead of Rome. His family tomb sat on the Appian Way. He wouldn't rest in the ungrateful city. Eumenes II of Pergamon became the treaty's biggest winner. He gained control of Mysia, Lydia, Phrygia, northern Lycia, most of western Anatolia. His kingdom went from a regional player to a major power overnight. He used the wealth to build. The Pergamon altar, one of the ancient world's architectural marvels, was constructed in this period. The library at Pergamon became second only to Alexandria. Eumenes ruled until 159 BCE. His successors maintained the alliance with Rome. When Attalus III died in 133 BCE, he bequeathed Pergamon to Rome in his will. The kingdom became the Roman province of Asia. Peaceful transition. Rome's client system worked. 189 BCE, consul Gnaeus Manlius Vulso led a campaign into Galatia. 2 battles, Mount Olympus and Ancyra. The Romans crushed the Galatians in both. Vulso's army looted extensively. This wasn't about strategy. This was about plunder and sending a message. The Galatians who dared support Antiochus would pay. They did. Their territories were raided, their towns sacked. They survived as a distinct culture, but never challenged Rome again. So, at Magnesia, he brought 54, positioned them throughout his line, between the phalanx units, behind the cavalry wings, everywhere, and it backfired. The ones in the phalanx intervals panicked and destroyed his center. The ones on the flanks were captured when those wings collapsed. 15 elephants surrendered. The rest fled or were killed. After Magnesia, Seleucid reliance on elephants ended. The treaty prohibited them anyway. But tactically, commanders learned elephants are powerful but unpredictable. Use them wrong and they're more dangerous to you than the enemy. Researchers have found scattered artifacts consistent with a major battle. Weapon fragments, coins from the period, burial sites with mass interments. Nothing as definitive as a mass grave with battle trauma. But the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Most battlefield archaeology relies on metal detection and surveys. A lot remains buried. Livy's account in Ab Urbe Condita Libri, book 37 chapters. 37 through 44 covers the battle in detail. He wrote in the late 1st century BCE, roughly 150 years after the event, but had access to earlier sources now lost. Polybius, who wrote closer to the battle, covered it in his histories, but those sections are lost. Livy probably used Polybius. Appion's Syrian Wars, written in the 2nd century CE, another century after Livy, provides additional details, especially on troop numbers and dispositions. He also likely relied on Polybius. Both sources agree on the broad strokes. Roman army about 30,000, Seleucid army about 70,000, massive Seleucid casualties, minimal Roman losses, elephant panic in the center, scythed chariot failure on the left, Antiochus's cavalry. Success on the right, but irrelevant to the outcome. Accurate casualty counts didn't exist. Victors estimated by counting bodies or took captured enemy reports. Numbers got exaggerated. But even conservative estimates show Magnesia was catastrophic for Antiochus. The cataphracts on Antiochus's right wing smashed the Latin infantry. Man for man, the forces were comparable. The difference was system. Roman legions were organized for flexibility, combined arms coordination, rapid response to changing battlefield conditions. Hellenistic armies were organized around the phalanx, a formation that required perfect conditions. Rome didn't give them perfect conditions. This is the second time a Scipio destroyed an empire's western army. Scipio Africanus defeated Hannibal at Zama, ending Carthaginian dominance in the western Mediterranean. 17 years later, he was at Magnesia when Rome broke Seleucid power in the east. 2 brothers, 2 decisive battles, 2 empires humbled. The Scipios became Rome's greatest military family. Scipio Aemilianus, adopted grandson of Africanus, would later destroy Carthage completely in 146 BCE and Numantia in 133 BCE. The family's legacy was victory. His forces looted the Seleucid camp, while Antiochus was still bogged down at the Roman camp. Without Eumenes, the battle outcome might have been different. The Romans recognized this. The treaty rewarded Pergamon massively. Eumenes went from regional king to the dominant power in Asia Minor. Rome gave him that. In return, he became Rome's most loyal eastern ally. Antiochus used an obsolete weapon from the Persian Wars. Alexander the Great faced scythed chariots at Gaugamelas in 331 BCE against Darius III, 200 of them. They failed then, too. The Macedonian phalanx opened ranks, let the chariots through harmlessly, closed ranks, and continued the advance. That was 140 years before Magnesia. Antiochus saw the same tactic used at Gaugamela, knew it failed, and deployed scythed chariots anyway. Why? Intimidation, maybe. Or he thought Roman infantry, less experienced against Hellenistic tactics, would panic. They didn't. Eumenes didn't give them a chance. The chariots routed before contact. 40 chariots, probably 160 horses plus crew, turned into friendly fire. The weapon designed to break formations broke Antiochus's own formation. The war indemnity, 15,000 talents paid over 12 years, drained the Seleucid economy. Taxes increased across the empire. Rebellions followed. Provinces that had been restive but controllable became openly hostile. Antiochus III's final years were spent trying to extract money to pay Rome. He died robbing a temple in Elam. His successors inherited the debt and the instability. In 162 BCE, 78 years after the battle, when Roman envoys hamstrung the Seleucid elephants in Antioch, they did it on the anniversary of Magnesia. Polybius records this. The Romans didn't just enforce the treaty, they humiliated the Seleucids on the exact date their empire fell. The memory of Magnesia wasn't a distant battle. It was a recurring wound, reopened deliberately to remind the Seleucids who ruled the Mediterranean. The phalanx's vulnerability to flanking became textbook. Every military academy in the ancient world taught Magnesia as the example. The formation requires both flanks protected. Antiochus's left wing collapsed from Eumenes' charge. Once that flank was gone, the phalanx was doomed. You can't turn a phalanx 90 degrees mid-battle. The sarissas are too long, the formation too dense. Once the enemy gets on your flank, you're fighting as individuals against an organized force. Not a battle, a slaughter. His son Seleucus couldn't rally troops after the chariot disaster. Center Commander Philippos couldn't control elephants, separate parts fighting separate battles. Romans fought as one army. A well-drilled smaller force beats a poorly coordinated larger force, every time. The Seleucid king personally led thousands of cataphracts and couldn't break 200 defenders at a fortified position. Roman camps were engineering marvels: ditch, rampart, palisade. Even temporary camps were fortified. Lepidus had fortifications and discipline. Antiochus had numbers. Numbers don't break walls. You outnumber them more than 2 to 1. You have 54 elephants. Then battle starts. Chariots flee before contact. Left wing collapses in minutes. Elephants behind you panic, trampling comrades. Formation breaks. Romans with short swords cut through your ranks. Cavalry hits from sides. No retreat order. Just run or die. That psychological destruction ripples through armies. The Seleucid military never recovered its confidence. Roman morale contrasted sharply. They were outnumbered, far from home, but they trusted their system. The legion had beaten Carthage, beaten Macedon. It would beat the Seleucids. The confidence came from training. Roman soldiers drilled constantly. Unit cohesion wins battles. 1,400 prisoners faced slavery. The slave markets at Delos, Ephesus, Rome absorbed thousands of war captives annually. Magnesia added another batch. His son, Seleucus IV, inherited the debt and diminished empire. He was assassinated in 175 BCE. Internal instability, direct result of Magnesia. He died of old age. Dynasty continued until Attalus III bequeathed the kingdom to Rome. Peaceful end. Seleucid power was broken. Within decades, Parthia expanded westward. By 141 BCE, they controlled Mesopotamia. By 129 BCE, Media. The Seleucids, once stretching from Aegean to India, were confined to Syria and pieces of Iran. Magnesia started that collapse. Envoy Gaius Popilius Lanus met Antiochus outside Alexandria, drew a circle around him in sand, told him to decide, withdraw or fight Rome before stepping out. Antiochus withdrew. One envoy, no army, ended an invasion. That's the power Magnesia gave Rome, the reputation of invincibility. Antiochus IV knew what happened to his grandfather. He wasn't risking the same. Gaius Marius reformed the legions in 107 BCE, creating the cohort system. Julius Caesar used cohorts to conquer Gaul. The principles remained: combined arms, flexible formations, discipline, training. The phalanx survived in modified forms, but no one relied solely on it after Magnesia. The age of pure pike formations was over. Art, architecture, philosophy, literature flowed westward. The Scipio Circle embraced Greek philosophy. Polybius, the historian, wrote his histories, using Magnesia as a key example of Roman tactical superiority. Roman elite adopted Greek education. This cultural fusion shaped Western civilization. Magnesia was military victory and cultural gateway. But maintaining elephants is expensive. Most didn't live long. Disease, poor care, climate shock. The elephants at Magnesia were bred for war, trained to charge. When panic took them, training failed. Nature overrode conditioning. War elephants were powerful when controlled, and when uncontrolled, disasters. Hellenistic kingdoms learned this repeatedly, still used them. Prestige mattered until they stampeded. He died robbing a temple, trying to fund the Roman indemnity. The man who ruled from Mediterranean to Bactria, who called himself the Great, ended his life as a thief. He was buried somewhere in Elymais. Exact location lost. No grand tomb, just an unmarked grave in a region he conquered decades earlier, dying for money to pay an enemy he should have never fought. That's the real cost of Magnesia, not just the dead, the broken empire, the diminished legacy, the great king forgotten except as the man who lost to Rome. Because the legion proved better than the phalanx when conditions weren't perfect, and conditions are never perfect. But the hamstrung elephants in Antioch decades later, on the anniversary, that tells you the wound never healed.